Welcome. Hello. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Westside Congregation in Rio Rancho. We are glad that you are going to join us for our online service today. I am David Kuhn, Service Associate for today. The Reverend Dr. Nancy Hitt, our consulting minister, is our speaker. If you are new to our congregation, please explore our website at UUWC.org. You may also direct questions to Reverend Nancy at ministeruuwc@gmail.com. Our service today is entitled, "What Does Confucius Say?" in honor of National Asian Heritage Month. We will only be able to address a very small portion of the legacy of Asian peoples. We hope that your experience here today inspires you to seek more information for yourself later. Our program is based on UU Principles 1 and 6, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, along with Source 3, wisdom from the world's religions, which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life. Today, Steve is behind the camera, and Bram will share our animal ministry moment with us. Our thanks to both of them for their service. Here are the announcements for today. The Storehouse West Bin is available on the patio for your donation at any time, literally 24/7. They appreciate non-perishable food items and recyclable plastic bags. We have discovered a caustic chemical drain cleaner under our kitchen sink. We cannot use products like this. They destroy the necessary bacteria in our septic system, ultimately costing us for the services necessary to restore the system. Please do not donate such products to the church. We cannot use them. But thank you for your good intentions. We are in need of volunteers to help tidy up the church to get it ready for on-site services again. If you are willing to help with this, please notify Reverend Nancy at ministeruuwc@gmail.com. If you are viewing this video on Sunday, May 16th, remember our town hall meeting is today at 12:30 p.m. Check your email for a link to the meeting via Zoom. Reverend Nancy will check her email one final time at 12:15 in case you've lost your link and need to ask for another. Please join me now in lighting our chalice. If you have a personal chalice or candle to light at home, draw it closer to you now as we join in the words on your screen together. Down through the ages and from around the world, wisdom from our planet's nations flows together, enriching us all. May our celebration of Asian heritage inspire us with a new point of view. Shalom and blessed be. Please join me in affirming our aspirations as they appear on your screen. Life is a gift. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and mysteries of this great gift. In the light of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. Shalom.
I invite you now to sit back and relax wherever you are. Uncross your ankles, knees, wrists, Close your eyes if you are comfortable doing so. Let your mind go blank. Turn your attention to your breathing. Breathe deeply and fully, expanding your belly with air as you inhale, exhaling completely through your nose. Let yourself relax into the rhythm of your breath. As stray thoughts cross your mind, let them go. Simply set them aside for another time. Breathe in and out, and in and out. Focus your attention on the white screen of your mind. Onto that screen, let the image of a safe pond appear. It is calm on the water and clear. You can see the sandy bottom and the minnows swimming about. There are reeds along the far edge. Lush grass leads up to it. And in the distance, there may be trees or a mountain. Let the picture fill itself in your mind. Rest in front of your pond. Focus on your senses, one at a time. What do you hear at the pond's edge? What do you smell? What are you touching? What do you taste when you breathe through your mouth? What do you see as you gaze about? Relax into the peace of this moment at your pond and begin to gather your impressions and tuck them into your memory. Refocus your attention on your breathing. Let the screen of your mind go blank again. Breathe in and out, and in and out. Begin to be aware of your whole body seated in the here and now. And when you are ready, open your eyes. Shalom. We are in the habit of sharing our joys and concerns with each other when we gather. Together, we celebrate joys and support concerns and weave the web of community among us. If you have a personal candle at home, we invite you to light it as we light our final candle here. We light a candle of joy that the death rate from COVID-19 is at its lowest in 10 months here in the U.S. We light a candle of concern for the people of the world living in areas that have insufficient vaccine and other supplies to care for the afflicted. We light a candle of joy for local students and teachers who are finishing out a very bizarre educational year. May their summer vacations provide genuine rest and recreation. We light a candle of concern for the increasing numbers of children presenting at the border we hold in common with Mexico, especially the 5 girls, ranging from a baby of 11 months old to 7 years old, abandoned by a smuggler and found by a farmer. We light our final candle in honor of all that remains unspoken in the privacy of our own hearts and minds. We light this red candle in honor of the victims of racial violence. May the awareness of their struggle motivate us to work for justice in all circumstances. Shalom and amen.
Hello. Animals do not come into the world to learn and experience life like we do. They are perfect, just the way they are made. It is no mystery to animals that they will live for all eternity. In fact, it is for this reason there are no animal ghosts, only spirits. Now, this is a little cat, and his name is Hobbs. And Hobbs says, the moment in perspective. Seeing Morris the cat not eating 9 lives, I was wondering what else from my kittenhood was a lie. It is a common misconception that cats are resistant to change. Look at me, for example. My human moved my favorite outside chair, the one that gives me a bird's eye view of the birds, and the ability to scope for approaching pooches. A younger kitten might have gotten his tail all twitchy, but I simply adapted by refusing to move, even as my human lifted the chair and hung it on the railing. Was I a bit nervous when the chair started to tip? Yes. Did I get annoyed when my human gently shook the chair and said, "Get off, Hobbs"? I did. But dealing with change means that sometimes you dig your claws in and refuse to move. You didn't pee on the chair legs for nothing.
This morning, our moment for all ages is taken from the book Confucius, Great Teacher of China. It was written by Demi. Demi is the author and illustrator of more than 150 beautifully illustrated picture books on subjects ranging from Buddhist folk tales to Florence Nightingale. She has studied and traveled extensively in China and has long been inspired by the wisdom and compassion of Confucius. I will be reading selected passages from the book to you. The lovely illustrations that she has done will appear on your screen as I speak. Confucius. In China, he is known as Kongzi, or Master Kong. In the West, he is known by the Latinized form of his name, Confucius. Confucius was a joyous man, as well as a great teacher and philosopher. He once said, "I was not born with knowledge, but I am quick to seek it." Though the facts of his life are shrouded in legend, the truths he found have influenced the world for generations. Many Chinese people feel that no matter the political situation or their religious inclinations, they are followers of Confucius at heart. Tradition says that in the year 551 BCE, a rare and beautiful kiln emerged from a forest in the Chinese state of Lu. When it appeared before a young woman praying near Mount Mu, she recognized it as a lucky omen and tied a red ribbon around its horn. The kiln gave her a jade tablet carved with the words, "Your child will be a king without a crown." Soon after, the young woman gave birth to Confucius. Some legends say the baby looked very much like his father, a retired soldier with a great bulge on his forehead. Others say the child was handsome, brilliant, and full of charm. One adds that a comet, 2 protective dragons, and 5 old men representing the planets and stars appeared in the sky to celebrate Confucius' birth, and all the birds in the land sang from the trees. Confucius always believed in the importance of ritual. As a young boy, he loved to dress up in ceremonial robes and act out rites with his friends. Yet Confucius' early life was also marked by sadness. In 548 BCE, when he was only 3 years old, his father died. "We were humble and poor when I was young. That's why I can do so many practical things," he said later. Confucius grew up to be very tall and exceedingly strong and energetic. He enjoyed hunting, fishing, archery, and working with horses. But of all his activities, he loved reading and studying most, pursuing them with genuine passion. He remarked, "At 15, I set my heart on learning." In 533 BCE, when Confucius was 18, he married a young woman named Kiguan. When they had a son, they nicknamed him Liu, which means large carp or big fish, because on the day of his birth, a neighbor brought a carp, which was an auspicious gift. Chinese society at that time emphasized that children should obey parents, wives should obey husbands, common people should obey leaders, and everyone should know their places. It was believed this orderly living would bring continual harmony and peace. As a dutiful son and father, Confucius took many jobs to support his family. He served as a clerk in a granary, and later worked as a keeper of sacred oxen and sheep. Still, Confucius nurtured his passion for learning, studying history, religion, and music whenever he could. Tradition says that he once traveled to Shenzhou, the capital city of the Zhou dynasty. There he met Laozi, the great philosopher who established Taoism and served as court librarian to the king. The two men's views were very different. Laozi taught that everyone should lead simple lives devoted to meditation and the study of nature, while Confucius believed in a well-disciplined society where people were involved in public service. A society is a living thing, he believed. To bring this suffering to an end, society itself would need to change. It should work for the good of everyone, not just the powerful. But Confucius knew that would require a revolution in the thinking and actions of both the rulers and the people. As Confucius considered his society, he realized that the most important quality someone could possess was ren, compassion, or love for other human beings. He also believed in the importance of de, virtue, acting according to moral standards. A person who practiced de acquired e, righteousness. De and e could then be demonstrated through li, correctness in all actions, rituals, speech, and behavior. Li was important because manners and customs were the cement that held a society together. If an individual developed all these qualities, that person would have wisdom or jor. Ren and yi together would indicate that someone was a zhuanzi, a superior human being. Zhuanzi were the people who were most fit to lead others. If leaders love ritual, the people cannot be anything but reverent, Confucius said. If leaders love duty, the people cannot be anything but humble. If leaders love standing by their words, the people cannot be anything but sincere. Once this is done, people from all corners of the earth will come to the land. If rulers governed with these qualities, their work would be easy and the people would be content. In a tumultuous and violent world, Confucius was the first philosopher to propose compassion as a virtue that leaders should exercise, and as an act that could bind people together in society. Confucius looked for a government position where he could put his righteous ideas into practice. But none of the powerful regional rulers wanted to hear that they should be kinder to their people and demonstrate more virtue themselves. Confucius decided that the best way to influence society was through education, so more people might acquire the skills and knowledge to govern. In 529 BCE, when he was 22, Confucius became a tutor. He taught many subjects, including poetry, religious and court rituals, music, languages, literature, history, government, writing, and mathematics. He was such an inspiring teacher that his reputation soared. Eventually, Confucius opened an entire school to spread his ideas. Only the wealthy usually received an education, but Confucius insisted that all young men were welcome to learn, so everyone might have an equal chance to lead. Soon he had many students, rich and poor, who were drawn to his joyous, magnetic personality. "Study as if you'll never know enough," he told them, "as if you're afraid of losing it all." Confucius taught his pupils the ancient rites and ceremonies that all government officials needed to know, but he also encouraged his students to think for themselves. "If they're not eager to learn, I don't enlighten them," he commented. "If they're not struggling to put into words, I don't assist them. I hold up one corner to show them, and if they can't come back with the other three, then I don't go on." While Confucius taught, he continued to look for a government position. Finally, Duke Ding of Lu appointed him governor of a small district called Chengtu. Confucius did so well as governor that in 501 BCE, he was made the police commissioner of Lu. Legend says that he instantly brought peace and harmony to the entire state. Though doors were left unlocked, there were no burglaries, and lost objects were always returned to their owners. But Duke Ding was not the ideal moral ruler Confucius hoped to serve. Ding accepted bribes of jewels and horses, and once allowed 80 dancing girls to distract him from his duties. Confucius wanted to find an enlightened ruler who would agree with his ideas about government and right behavior. So in 497 BCE, Confucius left Ding's court and began traveling with his devoted students, looking for another government post and teaching along the way. Wandering through the warring states brought Confucius many wild and dangerous adventures. He was often cold and hungry, and more than once he was nearly killed by bandits or his political enemies. But Confucius never lost his sense of humor, and he was supported by his faithful disciples who continued to absorb his wisdom. He taught them that the moral purpose of humanity is to make ourselves better. If, on examining himself, a man finds nothing to reproach himself for, what worries and fears can he have? He said. Confucius had also succeeded as an educator. His philosophy was alive and thriving. He had taught hundreds of students who could spread his wonderful ideas about human behavior and a compassionate society. Confucian learning and spiritual instruction would form the basic education of the people who governed China for the next 2,400 years. Legend has it that in 479 BCE, a strange animal was killed in the state of Lu. No one knew what it was, so they put it in a wagon and brought it to Confucius. Confucius realized that it was the very same kiln that had come out of the forest to greet his mother before he was born. It still wore shreds of the ribbon that she had tied around its horn more than 70 years earlier. The death of a kiln is a very bad omen, and Confucius believed it foretold his own death. Shortly thereafter, at the age of 72, Confucius became very ill. All his disciples watched over him. Confucius died 7 days later. His faithful students buried him in the city of Khufu. His disciples built a temple on the site, and for more than 2,000 years, his grave has been visited by a steady stream of pilgrims. Confucius' disciples and their followers also compiled their master's sayings in a book called The Dialogues or Conversations. The book is known here in the West as the Analects, and it contains the living words of Confucius. 200 years after his death, the great Han Dynasty adopted Confucian principles in matters of governance and education. This dynasty endured for more than 4 centuries, setting a new cultural standard of excellence. 2,000 years after his death, Confucian concepts about the relationship between people and governments continue to inspire societies around the globe. As the kiln foretold, Confucius' influence has been so immense that some still think of him as China's uncrowned king. The end.
Gifts of love and commitment. Confucius said, courtesy, generosity, honesty, persistence, and kindness. If you are courteous, you will not be disrespected. If you are generous, you will gain everything. If you are honest, people will rely on you. As a community, we rely on each other for our life together. Your generosity keeps us alive and able to engage in the things that matter most to us. Thank you for your kindness and persistence in getting your pledges and contributions to us. Shalom.
Our reading from today is taken from our hymnal. It is selection number 601, titled, When All the People. It goes like this. When all the people of the world love, then the strong will not overpower the weak. The many will not oppress the few. The wealthy will not mock the poor. The honored will not disdain the humble. The cunning will not deceive the simple. Shalom. May is Asian Pacific Heritage Month, signed into law by President Jimmy Carter in 1978 as a week-long observance that President George H.W. Bush extended to a full month in 1990. There is no single place defined as Asia that lines up with the people who claim Asian ancestry. For example, 2/3 of Eastern Russia is technically on the continent of Asia, but Russian people are not included in the social category of Asian people. Asian Americans may have ancestors who hail from China, Japan, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, India, Pakistan, the Philippines, Bangladesh, and many more, for a total of 48 countries. Pacific Islanders are people from any of the hundreds of islands in Polynesia, Micronesia, and Melanesia. This includes the state of Hawaii. The contributions to the world civilization from these areas is enormous. Foods that we eat and drink regularly, agricultural practices, technological advances, the number 0, the wheelbarrow, from small items to great concepts, Asia and the Pacific Islands have contributed enormously to the world as we know it. It is impossible for me to even list out an adequate representation of those contributions in the time remaining in our service. So I'm just going to list 10 contributions from China as the background for looking at a little more about Confucius and then our current dilemma with anti-Asian racism. Here are 10 things, some of which I expect you may be aware of, but others not, that were invented by the people of China. Paper, not papyrus or vellum, but paper. Gunpowder. Printing. The Chinese had the first printing press. The compass. How about a seismograph? Tea, silk, porcelain, the blast furnace, which I believe you need to make porcelain, and of course the ever-popular and wonderful fireworks. That's an impressive legacy, and that's just skimming off the top. I'm willing to bet that every single person watching this service regularly benefits from Chinese ingenuity, whether we know it or not. In addition to these specific contributions, there is the work of Confucius, founder of a philosophy or religion, take your pick of terms, because people still argue over what to call his legacy, that is still studied and revered today in and outside of China. Confucius himself did not describe his work as a religion. He identified as a teacher whose passion was making people think. But many people have observed the comprehensive nature of his philosophy that embraces concepts of life and death and heaven and afterlife rewards, and noted that it works very much like other religions do. So, if you are a UU who identifies as humanist or atheist, feel free to think of Confucius as a philosopher. If you're a UU who identifies as a theist or spiritual person, think of him as the founder of religion. Ultimately, Confucius may be the original hybrid when it comes to such things. His thinking was comprehensive and designed to make sense of all aspects of life. As the book we read together told us, Confucius wanted to help people create and maintain an orderly society in which the people were well disciplined and compassionate. He wanted to relieve suffering. He believed that a person was responsible for their own character, that each person should examine their own behavior daily and strive to improve it. He also believed that leaders, be they emperors or police or businessmen and merchants, had a responsibility to model the behavior they desired to see in their people. As you heard earlier, that did not make him popular with a lot of leaders. Confucius called all people to 5 virtues. He said, to practice 5 things under all circumstances constitutes perfect virtue. These 5 are gravity, generosity of soul, sincerity, earnestness, and kindness. Quality is not an act, it is a habit. He also said, courtesy, generosity, honesty, persistence, and kindness. If you are courteous, you will not be disrespected. If you are generous, you will gain everything. If you are honest, people will rely on you. If you are persistent, you will get results. At the risk of sounding a little bit reductionist, it's a little like that piece titled, "Everything I Ever Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten." And I say that not to diminish, but rather to emphasize the basic structure that Confucius put forth. There is no esoteric or complex knowledge that must be mastered. Confucius observed human behavior, saw what worked and what did not, and called that to people's attention. Confucius taught that the key to achieving proper self-mastery was adherence to correct ritual. In Confucius' teachings, ritual encompassed both religious practices, like the veneration of dead ancestors, as well as the broader concepts of etiquette and correct social interaction. Knowing how to behave in all circumstances increased the likelihood of success. The records of ritual, the Analects, and numerous other collections of his sayings portray Confucius as deeply concerned with the proper performance of ritual and music. In such works, the description of the attitudes and affect of the performer became the foundation of a ritual psychology in which proper performance was the key to reforming desires and beginning to develop moral dispositions. Confucius sought to preserve the Zhu ritual system and theorized about how ritual and music reinforced social roles, limited desires, and transformed character. Although a stickler for following ritual precisely, he was equally clear that the attitude the participant brought to the ritual was extraordinarily important. Confucius observed the human response to meaningful ritual and prescribed it as a way to shape human character and encourage virtue. Interestingly, modern science and psychology support Confucius' observations. Ritual, a prescribed, repetitive action, is defined in modern terms as a container for experience. Most of us can attend firsthand to the effect that various kinds of music have on us, some of it very emotional. Modern science has even studied the effect of various musical sounds based on vibrational frequency on the resulting mood of the listener. For example, you may find that bagpipes set your teeth on edge, and you love jazz. I, on the other hand, love bagpipes and find myself agitated and wanting to climb out of my skin by jazz. We are not all the same in regard to how we're wired neurologically, but the interaction between music and state of mind is real. The ancient Greeks also used music to heal. Its effect is well documented. I doubt that Confucius ever had to cope with bagpipes, but bells and stones were definitely part of his world and part of the ritual life that he enjoyed. Confucius does not have very much to say about war. Violence was completely prohibited because it is contrary to compassion. Here are a few quotes about war to give you a sense of where he was coming from. He said, "He who conquers himself is the mightiest warrior." And, "When music and courtesy are better understood and appreciated, there will be no war." Confucius also advocated for the young, insisting that the adult members of a community respect and cherish the young. In a country characterized by respect for the elderly and ancestor worship, he was unique in this. He was the first to advocate for education for everyone, not just the rich and privileged. He taught anyone who wanted to learn. Confucius never saw the success of his own teachings, but they were followed for centuries in China and influenced the development of other Asian countries also. At the level of individual, family, or small community, they often still do with great success. However, his focus on a centralized top-down form of government is not as influential today. He was definitely a product of his time, a man who wanted compassion, respect, and kindness to be universal within the context of the world as he knew it. Those are values that we still seek today. In fact, Confucius might make a good UU, although Principle 5, with its emphasis on democratic process, might be a little bit unsettling for him. If we're going to try and adopt his insights for ourselves today, I would say that the guidelines Confucius lays out for leaders and people of power, we should all be applying directly to ourselves as part of our democratic approach to things. This is just a tiny taste of the contribution of Asian heritage to our world. China is only one country among many. Like most other countries, those of Asia have complex histories both within their own borders and among the nations of the world. In that, they are just like us. The U.S. has a complex internal history that we struggle to cope with, and complex international history that leaves a troubling legacy to be dealt with. Part of all of our history is the history of anti-Asian sentiment, of racism in the United States toward Asian and Pacific Islanders. Here's a brief overview of the major events in our U.S. Asian American history. And rather than rewrite history, I am sharing this with you from an article in the Washington Post that was published in March of this year, written by Gillian Brockell. To begin, Chinese immigrants began coming to the United States in significant numbers in the 1850s, largely to California and other western states, to work in mining and railroad construction. There was high demand for these dangerous, low-wage jobs, and Chinese immigrants were willing to fill them. Almost immediately, the racist trope of Asians coming to steal white jobs was born. And in 1854, the California Supreme Court reinforced racism against Asian immigrants in People versus Hall, ruling that people of Asian descent could not testify against a white person in court, virtually guaranteeing that whites could escape punishment for anti-Asian violence. In this particular case, it was murder. George Hall shot and killed Chinese immigrant Ling Sing, and the testimony of witnesses was rejected because they were Asian. On October 24, 1871, following the murder of a white man caught in the crossfire between rival Chinese groups, more than 500 white and Hispanic rioters surrounded and attacked Los Angeles' small Chinese community, centered in a red light district known as Negro Alley. At least 17 Chinese men and boys were lynched, including a prominent doctor. They were hanged across several downtown sites, anywhere the rioters could find a beam to string a noose. 8 of the rioters were eventually convicted of manslaughter, but their convictions were overturned. No one else was ever punished. Economic woes in the 1870s spawned another spike in anti-Asian racism and scapegoating. In 1882, Congress overwhelmingly passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, which banned Chinese immigration for 20 years. President Chester A. Arthur vetoed it, but then signed another version with a 10-year ban. This was the first law placing a restriction on immigration in the United States. It was extended for more than 60 years before it was repealed in 1943. In Rock Springs, Wyoming Territory at the time, long-standing aggression against Chinese miners exploded in September of 1885 when 100 to 150 vigilantes surrounded and attacked Chinese mine workers, killing 28 people and burning 79 homes. Hundreds fled to a nearby town, then were tricked into boarding a train they were told would take them to safety in San Francisco. Instead, it took them back to Rock Springs, where they were forced back into the mine. Federal troops stayed for 13 years to impose order. In 1900, an outbreak of bubonic plague struck San Francisco. It is likely that the outbreak began with a ship from Australia, but since the first stateside victim was a Chinese immigrant, the whole community was blamed for it. Overnight, the city's Chinatown was surrounded by police, preventing anyone but white residents from going in or out. Chinese residents were also subjected to home searches and property destruction by force. The episode is an historic prelude to the racism that has been aimed at Asian Americans during the coronavirus pandemic, which former President Donald Trump frequently called the China virus, the Wuhan virus, and Kung Flu. By the 1940s, tens of thousands of Japanese immigrants and Japanese Americans had built lives in the United States. After Japan bombed Pearl Harbor and the United States entered World War II, the U.S. government forced all of them into internment camps for the duration of the war over suspicions they might aid the enemy. Conditions in the camps were extreme, blazing hot in summer and freezing cold in winter. No spies were ever found. When they were freed, many returned to find their homes and businesses vandalized or confiscated. In 1988, survivors received a presidential apology and $20,000 each in reparations. And then moving right up through history, at the close of the Vietnam War, the United States resettled many Vietnamese fleeing the communists. In Texas, many of those immigrants took up shrimping. We like the weather, we like shrimping. We like a chance to start our own businesses, Nguyen Van Nam told the Washington Post in 1984. As they worked hard and began to dominate the industry, the trope of Asians coming to take white jobs returned, and this time it was wearing a white hood. The Ku Klux Klan leader, Louis Beam, trained his members in commando-style attacks. They patrolled the waters in their regalia and set boats owned by Vietnamese people on fire. Vincent Chin was out on the town. On June 19th of 1982, the 27-year-old Chinese American was about to marry and was celebrating with friends in Detroit, when two white men picked a bar fight, blaming Chin for the Japanese taking their auto industry jobs. Outside the bar, the men beat Chin with a baseball bat. He died several days later. His assailants took a manslaughter plea bargain, which carried a possible sentence of 15 years. Instead, the judge gave the men probation and a $3,000 fine. The lenient sentence outraged and galvanized the Asian American community, helping them to unite across ethnic lines and work for civil rights. And I'm sure you heard that the man who was killed was a Chinese American, but he was blamed for the actions of the Japanese by those who didn't take the time to learn anything about anyone. I'm saying that, not the author. Then we have the LA riots. Tensions had been building between the Black and Korean American communities in Los Angeles for years. Then came the April 29, 1992 acquittal of the police officers caught on camera beating Rodney King. As the city erupted in riots, Korean American businesses became targets. Thousands were damaged during the unrest. And after the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, hate crimes spiked against Muslims and those perceived to be Muslim, including people of South Asian descent. Only 4 days after the attacks, aircraft mechanic Frank Silva Roque murdered Balbir Singh Sodhi, a Sikh American gas station owner, originally from India, whom Roque mistook for Muslim. The post-9/11 period led to greater awareness and advocacy between the South and East Asian communities. Recently, there has been a spate of news stories about anti-Asian racism and racial violence. As you can see from our history, it's real. The legacy is long. However, it is not the same as racism directed toward Black and other people of color. In part, this seems to be because the immigration of Asian people has a unique pattern, with many not arriving here until the 1960s. The focus of their immigration is often higher education instead of labor. In fact, Asian and Pacific Americans find themselves identified as the minority who made it by other minorities. They are stereotyped as quiet, intelligent, high achievers. One protester at a recent Stop the Hate rally on behalf of Asian and Pacific Americans carried a sign that read, "We are the quiet ones. Stop bullying us." In point of fact, racist violence and anti-racist practices in general against Asian and Pacific Americans most often occur at the hands of other minority groups. Unlike Black and other people of color, white supremacists don't seem to get too upset by Asians most of the time. It's an odd sort of hierarchy that matters for several reasons. It matters because it highlights the presence of racism throughout human culture. And it matters because it means that responses and interventions to stop anti-Asian racism need to be different than those made for Black and people of color racism. Being aware of this also means that white people need to be very careful not to opt out of responsibility for anti-Asian American racism. No matter the target group, it's all racism, whether on the part of one human being or a group of human beings toward another. It's all wrong. And history already testifies to a white involvement in anti-Asian racism. After I wrote this sermon out, I wondered if I should have reversed the order of things and put the material about racism before the material about Confucius. Because, I don't know about you, but I think it's really hard to get happy after hearing the history of anti-Asian racism and violence. But I decided to leave it as it is, because being unhappy with our current state of affairs is necessary. Please don't lose track of the marvelous contribution of Asian and Pacific Americans. Don't lose track of your sadness and repulsion in response to our history either. This is Asian and Pacific American Heritage Month. So we've all got plenty of time to get online and learn more. We've got time to do more in response to what we learn. Following the advice and example of Confucius, we all need to learn more and then examine ourselves to see where and how and why we should change ourselves. In doing that, we change the world, one person at a time. Shalom. I invite you now to post your questions and comments on either our website services page or our Facebook page or our YouTube page. You may also email me directly. Your feedback is important to all of us. Please join me now in extinguishing our chalice, repeating the words that appear on your screen with me. Our flame is extinguished, yet the light of what we have shared still glows in our hearts. May we incorporate the wisdom from Asian traditions into our hearts and minds. Shalom and Amen. May the wisdom of the ages and the sages inspire you. May your view of the world continually expand. May your heart and mind be enriched. Go, change the world. Shalom and blessed be.